tell them. I'll get brownie points.
I saw him last night, Bobby, and I said, you look just like the poor fellow. Without even trying. Without even trying.
Hey, how you doing?
Yes. I did. Okay, I've got it ready to go. Hey, Fabio. Right here, I got it right here. Right here.
Committee will come to order. We have the appointed time, and we now have a quorum. So members, please take your seats at the dais. Audience members, please take your seats in the audience, or if you have conversations, please take them out in the hall. Please silence your electronic devices, which you cannot live now without. I understand that, but silent. Good morning, one and all. As we're getting ready to get going with the committee, just several announcements. Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, I have a House Bill 2403 is mine. She had so much fun with the enactment last week. As general announcement, if anyone in the room is interested in my House Bill 2403, I will be glad to see you next Thursday morning, 10 a.m. in my office. I'm sorry, this Thursday, yes. Well, this Thursday is the next Thursday, but I know, I understand the confusion. 2 days from today, 10 o'clock in my office. If that is not a large enough venue, we will find one. If you have any interest in the matter, that would be the time to have those issues addressed. If you cannot be there in person, I take written comments, suggestions, questions, proxies, things of that nature. That was House Bill 2403. For a full committee and the audience, just to understand where we are process-wise. All bills have been docketed for sub or full as of this juncture. Not counting today, the full committee has 3 more meeting days in order to meet the timeline for crossover. That means all subcommittees have to have completed their work at least by next Wednesday evening, preferably by next Tuesday evening. The subcommittee definite schedule is as follows. Subcommittee 1 will be meeting immediately upon adjournment of full today, and it has reserved next Monday evening if needed. Subcommittee 3 will be meeting this Wednesday, be meeting next Tuesday, immediately upon adjournment, and has reserved next Wednesday evening if needed. Subcommittee 2 will be meeting Thursday immediately upon adjournment, and probably has reserved another time if needed. It's kind of the lay of the land. So full committee members understand that's going to mean we're moving and rocking and clawing. Any other general announcements? The process will be, we will be taking up subcommittee reports first on our docket. Then we have 6 bills that have not been to subcommittee we will take up by way of further general announcement. Measures that were heard in subcommittee, we will open to public comment if you have information that was not available to be heard at the subcommittee level, information new, or you were unable to be at the subcommittee process. We will take public testimony, but we will not open them up for a full public hearing as such once they've been heard at the subcommittee level, unless there are extenuating circumstances. That being said, we'll first, subcommittee 2, are you ready, Delia Bell, to present?
Mr. Chair, I am.
All right, please.
Chair, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that reported out unanimously. We'll do this first, and there was one that was not unanimous. The first is House Bill 1426. Delegate Garrett, he is here. He can present it, or how would you like to do these whether unanimous?
If you want to just go ahead, and then if we have questions of the patron, we'll start with that.
To keep this consistent with the Senate version, there is a proposed amendment from the patron. I would ask that staff to report it.
Mr. Chair, the first amendment is on page 1, line 18, after comma association, strike the Virginia Magistrate System Coordinator, insert the Virginia Association of Health Plans. The second amendment is also on page 1, line 20, after association, comma, insert the Virginia Association of Regional Jails.
Does everybody understand those proposed amendments? Without objection, we'll adopt them by general consensus.
Mr. Chair, this
They're
time,
not properly adopted.
this came out of the Deeds Commission. The issue was alternative transportation models, different ways to get people to the hospital when they are decompensated. This sets up a stakeholder study group on how best to do it. It
And the unanimous recommendation is to
report, and
as amended.
I so move.
All right. Any questions from the committee members? Anyone in the audience will be heard on House Bill 1426 was unable to be at subcommittee. The motion from subcommittee is to report with amendments. Members, record your vote on the board on the motion to report. There. All members voted, declare to be recorded. Yeah, you're doing good. Bill is reported 15 to nothing. Delegate Bell.
House Bill 1484 was the other delegate, the 2 other delegate Bells, Delegate Richard Bell, and it involved different ways that you could get the continuing learning activities for occupational therapists. There was a question about how that could best be done. There was a rule moving through. This would set up an alternate model. It was the unanimous recommendation to report with a substitute. So the first step, I guess, is we need to accept a substitute at this level, or is it already accepted?
The substitute should be before the members.
I will
Ms. Ayers already.
I move the committee.
Without objection, we'll adopt the amendment nature of the substitute for 1484.
Mr. Chair, with the substitute before us, it was the unanimous recommendation of the subcommittee to report, and I so move.
All right, yes, sir.
Would the patron or the subcommittee chair explain what the bill does again, one more time? I'm sorry.
All right, most companies that I don't remember is he here.
Not yet.
I can try, if there's any issue, we can certainly make sure
Okay.
he comes in.
Sure.
There was a rule moving forward about who can provide the equivalent of CLEs, I don't know what they call them, continuing learning classes for occupational therapists. And there was a dispute within the occupational therapist community, and this would provide alternate routes to get the hours that they need.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the committee or discussion, comments from the audience? The motion is to report as amended. Record your vote on the board on the motion to report as a substitute. Have all members voted who care to be recorded? The matter is reported, 15 to nothing. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chair, House Bill 1615, Delegate Tyler. This involved the chief medical examiner. The current law requires them to appoint a medical examiner for each county, and for some time that has been practically impossible. This is something that they do as volunteers, and where they can't find one, the CME is actually breaking the law and asked us to make it so they're not breaking the law. So this would make it a may, not a shall, and they will do it as much as they can, and also change the terms of vacancy. It was the unanimous recommendation of the subcommittee to report, and I so move.
And I think we'll do everything we can, and I make the chief medical examiner a lawbreaker. I understand. Any questions from the committee and the audience to be heard on House Bill 1615? If not, committee members record your vote on the motion to report. All members voted and care to be recorded. Those reported 16 to none. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Rolling. Mr. Chair, House Bill 1747, Delegate O'Bannon. Mr. Chair, this bill, we have a substitute on, so let's report the substitute.
Members have before them a substitute for 1747. Without objection, we'll adopt the amendment nature of the substitute. Hearing none, it is now properly before us.
Mr. Chair, with the substitute, the issue was who can help prepare an advanced medical directive. There's certainly reason to think right now that if you're a non-lawyer and do it, you're breaking, again, unauthorized practice rules. This would say that that's not true. It also sets up a system where people can get training and licensure, certification, that they've received the training for how to help someone prepare an advanced medical directive. Those of us who like advanced medical directives hope this will encourage there to be more. So it was the unanimous recommendation of the subcommittee to report the substitute, and I so move.
Questions or comments from the committee? Anyone in the audience to be heard on House Bill 1747, substitute, before we take action? Members record their vote on the board on the motion to report as a substitute. All members voted who care to be recorded. The bill is reported 15 to nothing. Delegate Dunn.
Mr. Chair, House Bill 1919, was Delegate Robinson. There's a cap on the civil penalties. This is not being sued cap, but this is the penalties that can be imposed by DSS on, say, assisted living facility for noncompliance. It changes the $10,000 cap from 24 months to a 12 months, so it increases the amount of penalties that the DSS can assess against an assisted living facility. It was the unanimous recommendation of the subcommittee to report, and I so move.
Questions on House Bill 1919 from committee or discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
just, I don't want to slow down the train, but if someone at the DSS could tell me why they need this, what the problem is that we're trying to address. Somebody here.
Delegate Robinson, if I understood the,
I can try.
go ahead, Delegate.
If not, I'd ask
I've
this
been
bill.
briefed on this matter, side, please.
What they're saying is that as they assess damages over time, right now at 10,000, that's it, they stop. And they'd like that, that's over a 24-month period, it's aggregate, so you, a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here. They would like the cap to be higher so they can impose higher penalties on the real non-performers.
Thank you.
Further questions or discussion from the committee? Anyone in the audience to be heard on 1919? The recommendation is to report. Committee members record your vote on the board on the motion to report. voted. Bill is reported, 16 to nothing.
Mr. Chair, the last bill was 5-3, is a measure we have seen before. It prompted a substantial debate in subcommittee. The 1435, I'm sorry. The
House Bill 1435.
The patron delegate head is here. I would suggest we ask him to present it for the full committee. And then the motion was to refer to appropriations by 5-3 vote.
Delegate Head, do you care to explain the matter, please?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. This again is a revisit of the move to screen for substance abuse with the recipients of TANF and VIEW and the VIEW pilot program. This is something that we've discussed before, but it is particularly impactful in light of the discussions that we have had in this committee and in subcommittees, and we'll see things moving forward with the opiate abuse that we have in the Commonwealth. And the approach to call attention carefully is that, first of all, this bill would call for a screening process to be implemented and across all of the recipients of the VIEW program. And if there is evidence in that screening that substance abuse might exist, at that point there would be testing. If the testing comes up negative, then the state pays for it. If the testing comes up positive, then it would be paid for by the recipient, and then they might lose their benefits, but only if they refused to enter a treatment program. And the real push for this is to help move people, if they're experiencing a substance abuse problem, that they would get into treatment. In no way would this remove any of the benefits from any other members of the household. It is only the direct recipient and the one that would test positive. Similar to measures that have been enacted in other states across the country and has grown in popularity in other states, and that's why we have this before us today.
Any questions of the patron? This is a matter that we have seen in this committee a few times in the past several years. With no questions, comments, is there any testimony from the audience who was unable to come forward to the subcommittee? The motion will be to report and refer to appropriations. There's no further discussion. Members, record the vote on the board. Motion to report and refer to appropriations. Christie, Ellie Pease, do you care to be recorded on the matter? Okay. All righty. Bill. All members who voted who care to be recorded, the bill fails to report and be referred on a tie vote. All right, thank you. That completes your report. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chair, it does. We will have our next subcommittee meeting is Thursday morning. Yeah. Let me just tell every subcommittee while we're here, if we can finish Thursday morning, we are done with a fairly lengthy docket. Everyone should start to prepare for a Tuesday night meeting if we can be done. Thank you.
And my earlier announcement relative to my bill, I gave the wrong bill number. That presumes that I keep them all on the top of my head, not so much. House Bill 2304 is my bill that will be addressed in my office Thursday morning at 10. I believe the bill number I quoted, Delegate Garrett corrected me, that was something in transportation, which obviously I don't know nothing about. So, okay, so for clarification, that was my House Bill 2304. Okay. Alrighty, then we will go to bills that have not been heard in subcommittee. I see no patrons in the audience who are not on the full committee. So we will then go to full committee members. Delegate Farrell is not here yet, and Delegate Bell, 1922.
Mr. Chair, repeat that for just a minute.
All right, temporarily. Looking down the line, Delegate Price is not here. Oh, I'm sorry. Good morning. How are you? Delegate Price, good morning. House Bill 2095. And as you're coming forward, Delegate Price, I will tell you, I received notification if the committee acts favorably upon the policy, it will need to go to appropriations. So any favorable motion would be to report and refer to appropriations.
Mr. Chairman, I have amendments. Okay, there are, I believe, 8 line amendments to this bill. Line amendment 1
on page 3, line 125, following independent contractor of A, strike mental health service and insert the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, or A. Amendment 2, page 3, line 133. After Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, comma, A, strike mental health service. Also on page 3, line 165, after recovery specialist, insert or a qualified mental health professional who is not otherwise licensed by a health regulatory board at the Department of Health Professions. Amendment 4, we're going to move to page 6. Line 314, after independent contractor of, strike a mental health service and insert the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, or A. Further down that line, after provider, comma, strike the comma, as defined in section 54.1-2400.1. We're almost done. Line 322. After Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, comma, A, strike mental health service. The beginning of the next line, line 323, we want to strike as defined in section 54.1-2400.1. And the last one, on line 387, on page 7, after client's visit, comma, he, insert or his employer.
In the long and short, most of those amendments, am I correct, take out mental health service provider and just make clear that the Department of Behavioral Health Services will do it, or individuals that have been licensed under them. So these are largely technical amendments and don't have any substantive effect on the underlying legislation.
Correct.
Without objection, we'll adopt those amendments in a block. Hearing none, those are adopted by general consensus. Delegate Price.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, HB 2095 creates a process for registering peer recovery specialists and qualified mental health professionals. The amendments were collaborative technical adjustments, just as you heard, to make sure that there is clarity in who we are referring to in the legislation. The bill is in response to concerns jointly expressed by the Department of Health Professions, the Department of Behavioral Health and Development Services, and the Department of Medical Assistance Services about the lack of oversight and accountability for individuals who are currently providing mental health or substance abuse services. These individuals are not currently responsible to a health regulatory board with authority to take disciplinary action if needed. By requiring a person who works as a peer recovery specialist or qualified mental health professional to be registered by the Board of Counseling, if an issue arises, the individual can be disciplined and removed from the registry or no longer employed in the capacity. The importance of peer recovery specialists should not be missed here. Their lived and shared experience, including their own recovery, is invaluable when working with substance abuse patients. Their work is an integral part of us dealing with epidemics like our current opioid addiction crisis. Overdose deaths are the #1 cause of accidental deaths in the Commonwealth. We learned the dire situation in our briefing from Secretary Hazel, and peer recovery specialists were mentioned on page 29 under the behavioral health part of the solution. We know we need to act, and supporting the mechanism for payment and accountability for peer recovery specialists is an important step. They can provide effective support for others struggling with mental health or substance abuse disorders. Both peer recovery specialists and qualified mental health professionals can drastically increase the willingness of people struggling with addiction to seek treatment. In 2016, we as a body recognized their importance, and the Medicaid benefits were passed to support their work. Now a mechanism needs to be established to register those positions in order to receive the Medicaid reimbursements. Peer recovery specialists who are not certified would still be able to provide peer services but would not be reimbursed by DMAS. As mentioned, there is a fiscal impact statement for $64,875. And during the budget development and with discussions for DHP, it was estimated at that time that the position would cost $50,000, which is currently in the governor's budget. However, with more information since then, the estimate is higher, but it should be noted that they are entirely supported by fee revenue. Therefore, the fee will be set at a level sufficient enough to cover the cost.
Delegate Price, is this a recommendation of the department, or?
Yes.
Okay. And in long and short, this is to put us in compliance with what the federal government regulations now are going to require.
Yes, for reimbursement.
Okay. Are there any other questions of the patron?
I do. Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Delegate Bell.
I have a few questions. I don't. Was this in subcommittee? I don't want to.
No, sir.
Okay. So this would set up a, if you will, a professionalization of this category. Is that
Right.
fair? Okay. We've got qualified mental health professionals, and then registered peer recovery specialists.
Yes.
Okay. I understand that some people would professionalize it means that they would have a board, means that they could be disciplined if they're doing a bad job. And I might have missed the why. What does this get us? It puts us in compliance, Mr. Chair, or?
For the reimbursement for DMAS with the Medicaid funding, but also the accountability standards that you just said.
Okay. And once you, let's say you go through this and you get it, you're qualified, what can that person do that, I was going to say that Ms. Bogey can't do? Is there some, is it medical, what does that get you? In other words, what will someone get if they go through this? Why would a recovery group in Charlottesville want people to have this, not somebody else?
So I am going to ask for,
Phone a friend.
phone a friend, but also for the reimbursement.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Elaine Yates from the Department of Health Professions. The Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services currently sets the requirements and the qualifications for QMHPs and peers. The intent is that those qualifications will remain the same, and there are a variety of qualifications by which someone can become a QMHP. It may be anywhere from a physician to an LPN to a person who has a bachelor's degree and then a number of years of additional training and experience. All those requirements would stay in place, but what would happen is that the Department of Health Professions would put those persons on a registry. Right now, the only accountability is for the employer to determine whether or not they have the qualifications. And if the employer decides that they want to let them go for whatever reason, there's no accountability. They can go somewhere else and say, I'm a QMHP, and be hired by someone else. So this puts both the accountability at the front end for the term qualifications and at the back end for taking disciplinary actions if necessary.
Mr. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
I'm asking a question badly. If someone practices medicine and it's not regulated, of course, that person is an authorized practice. It's not just. Is there something like that for this?
Is there something like that?
Well, if someone says I'm a recovering addict, I'd like to help my friends. I don't have, for whatever reason, I can't qualify for this, or I choose not to go through it.
A recovering addict more likely would seek the pathway of becoming a peer recovery specialist.
Okay. What I'm asking is, I'm just trying to get if a doctor practices medicine and he can't, it's illegal, and that person would be prosecuted. Does something like this happen here? In other words, what happens if I want to set a Bell's counseling shop, and I want to do it in my basement, and I've got some people in the neighborhood, and they want to come by. Does this prevent that, or just I can't get paid?
More than likely, you would not qualify for QMHP.
I understand. I'm not qualifying for anything. I'm just saying.
It's not application for the DMAS reimbursement.
Okay, but there's nothing that's going to stop churches who do this, or AA meetings, or anything that. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
All right, further questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Delegate Garrett.
Thank you, Mr.
Chairman,
Chairman.
Delegate Peace and Delegate Stone.
Delegate Price or maybe Elaine. So we're establishing a registry for peer recovery specialists. Is that defined somehow nationally? Is there some educational background, or is this just peer-to-peer Or is this just other folks that deal in the psych world that have other degrees, licensed clinical social workers, counselors, MDs, and so forth and so on, that you now want to register? Which of those three entities?
It would be persons who have a degree of sorts, probably a mental health specialty. For example, a person who has a master's in psychology does not qualify for licensure as a clinical psychologist, but they could qualify as a QMHP with some additional experience. So there are people who have a level of education, training, and for the QMHPs, then they provide mental health services. For the peers, it is a peer-to-peer kind of arrangement.
Mr. Follow?
Yes, sir, I'll be here.
Elaine,
Yes.
do we have other registries that we use, or is this a new entity that
We
works?
do have other professions that are registered, pharmacy technicians are registered, medication aides are registered. So a registry is the lowest form of regulation, registration, certification, licensure. Registration means we put you on a list. If you mess up, you can be taken off of that list and therefore not qualified for reimbursement with DMAS if you have had disciplinary action by the Board of Counseling.
And final question, Mr. Chairman. The reason for those three, registration, certification, licensure, is for reimbursement from?
Well, in this case, it is for accountability, so that DMAS knows that this person is qualified, first of all, up front, and then secondly, has not had some reason to be disciplined. Otherwise, DMAS has no way of knowing that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Delegate Pease.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Yates, before you depart the lectern, I appreciate your answering a question. Are you familiar with the Council on Accreditation of Peer Recovery Support Services?
Yes, sir, I am.
And have you been able to examine its criteria, and how would that criteria compare to what would be required of someone to be registered as a specialist?
And I'm going to turn to Jamie Hall, the Executive Director of the Board of Counseling, to see if she knows that council.
There's 6 recovery community organizations nationwide that are accredited by that entity that I was asking about. And my concern with asking the question is, will registration and greater accountability, as you describe it by the state, have an undue or unintended negative consequence on those offering peer recovery services that don't seek or wish to be registered by the state?
And let me add too, before Jamie speaks, that in addition to peer recovery specialists, the board already certifies substance abuse counselors and substance abuse counseling assistants, so they also qualify for that reimbursement as peers.
Thank you.
Jamie Hoyle with Board of Counseling. I would just add that
Come closer to the mic.
this legislation wouldn't prevent someone from being a peer recovery specialist. Requiring the registration would just be tied to reimbursement. So people are acting as peer specialists right now throughout the Commonwealth, and they can have those accreditations through other entities, and it's separate from this requirement, which is just really for accountability for the state and reimbursement.
Mr. Chairman, just
Further
follow up.
questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologize to the committee. Can you give me some specific examples of those who've sought to be reimbursed? I'd like to get a sense of how broad this issue is, or what the scope of this issue is, because it would seem to me, sort of as a layperson, that to register and bring this community within the fold of sort of the Board of Counseling, if you will, that's just one step towards requiring all people who provide peer services to ultimately be licensed or certified, and certainly we have those in our community that are providing services, not treatment, because I think there's a distinction with those terms, and we don't want to drive out people from the field, when we're taking the all of the above approach to some of these issues that we're dealing with.
And we would certainly concur with that, and this is tied to reimbursement for the accountability to DMAS, and that the other services would not be affected with that.
And Mr. Chairman, reimbursement means a greater cost to the state to provide these services. When those who are not registered, who would not seek reimbursement, are providing that service at no cost to the state.
And they would not be affected at
Delegate Stoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some of the same concerns I think that have already been voiced here. I see that, sort of the fundamental purpose of a peer specialist is somebody who's been there and done that. And you put in here the registered peer recovery specialist, education and experience. So are we going to start educational requirements for these? If we're not going to start doing that, why do we have that language in here?
And I'll turn to my colleague at Behavioral Health, because those requirements have already been established at Behavioral Health. That process has already begun, and what DHP would do is recognize what Behavioral Health is already requiring.
Good morning, Dave Nair, Department of Behavioral Health. So we are drafting regulations about requirements for peer specialists, and those would essentially include a course, I believe it is 40 hours, that DBHDS is currently training trainers for certified peer specialists. And the idea is that peer specialists would get some training in working directly with other peers, managing that relationship, how they work as part of a treatment team. So the idea is not that they have to take baccalaureate degree or master's degree courses, but that they would have some training in addition to their experience with working, either at substance abuse or mental health, that they would have that training in how to appropriately counsel other peers.
Mr. Chairman?
Further questions? Yes, sir.
So I'm still struggling with this because it seems to me that we're trying to formalize what traditionally has been a very informal relationship in these counseling sessions. And the value of that is not having somebody who is sitting there with formal education on how to counsel somebody. It is somebody who can individually relate to that person in front of them. I'm always concerned that when we do things like this, we were actually undermining what we're trying to initially accomplish.
And I think the goal is exactly what you're saying. We're not trying to make peers into another counselor. There are already plenty of other professions that have counselors. So part of this is really making sure that we continue to recognize the unique value that peers bring to that relationship and to the overall treatment. And that they're really serving in a very different role in that treatment relationship. But part of the need for the registration is so that peers can be reimbursed by DMAS so that they can be part of that reimbursement structure. But we definitely recognize it's a very different relationship.
Yeah. Can you say that last sentence again, please? I just want to make the point that
It's all about the money and
we made a decision in the budget last year and funded these people through Medicaid because peer recovery is an integral part of dealing with substance abuse. And so what we're doing now is sort of comporting the code to do that. And I understand the barbs and the concerns that folks have, but I think at the end of the day, we're probably obligated to do something, so I'm personally going to vote for it.
And I guess maybe I could say two things about that, Mr. Chair. One is, yes, this bill would register peers so that they could be reimbursed by DMAS. It also very clearly does not limit or restrict peers practicing outside of this who are not registered. They would still be able to work and provide services.
All right, thank you. Are there others in the audience who would like to be heard? Delegate Bell.
Well, everybody's here. Can I make a statement, not a question? Are we that's
Well, let's see, is there anyone else from the audience? Let's get all the public testimony before we take any action on the matter.
Yes.
Others to be heard on the measure?
Jennifer Padura, the Virginia Network of Private Providers, and we support this bill. We appreciate the fact that both DHP and DMAS have worked closely with us to work out some of the issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Carrie Addison from Caliber, Virginia, Association of Behavioral Health Providers. We support the bill, specifically on the qualified mental health professionals piece.
Thank you.
Association of Community Services Boards, and we support this bill.
Thank you. Now, others to be heard on the matter from the public, either in support or opposition. Committee members? Delegate Bell?
Mr. Chair, just with all the stakeholders here, I want to just underline for everybody, I hope you're hearing that if we've been here a long time, most of us see mission creep, and that's what you're hearing, skepticism, and we will be great concern at this body if somehow this then becomes a mandatory that starts to shut down the people that we don't. That's all. Thank you.
Further questions or discussion on the matter? Committee members, what is your pleasure? It's been moved properly seconded that we would report and refer House Bill 2095 to appropriations. If there's no further discussion on the motion, members record your vote on the board on the matter to report and refer. All members voted who care to be recorded. The bill is reported and referred to appropriations 16-4.
Thank you.
Delegate Stalin?
Mr. Chairman, having voted on the prevailing side on which HB 1435 failed to report, I move that we reconsider that vote.
Do I hear a second? It's been moved properly seconded that we reconsider the action on House Bill 1435 that failed to report on a tie vote. All those in favor of reconsideration signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay.
Nay.
The ayes have it. The matter is properly back before the committee.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I
Delegate
would like
Stalin.
a bye for the day.
Without objection, that matter will go by for the day. So it'll be back on our docket for Thursday full committee. Delegate Rasool, good morning. As you're coming up, just for those in the audience, at the patron's request, House Bill 2183, Delegate Yost will be going by for the day. And House Bill 2300, by for the day. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning.
HB 2156 first has a substitute.
We have an amendment made to a substitute for House Bill 2156. As it's being distributed, since we're not going to have the time to read this to know the differences, Delegate Rasool, would you tell us what differences are embodied in the substitute?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. HB 2156 originally provided for licensure of assisted living, adult daycare, and child welfare agencies operated by the Commonwealth. We have stripped all of the geriatric portions of this. This is just focusing on the child welfare agencies. What we were trying to fix here, there's a memorandum of understanding that's been placed, as you know, with a sovereignty provision that it prevents, for example, a daycare center at a university from being underneath the DSS or being licensed. Currently, there's a memorandum of understanding between those daycare centers and DSS for licensure. What we're trying to do is formalize this. Both DSS and the universities want this oversight. We've worked with DSS and stakeholders to ensure that everybody's, for the most part, on the same page.
And so, for the committee's understanding, compared to the original legislation, all this now affects is child daycare facilities operated by the Commonwealth. Without objection, we'll adopt the amendment nature of a substitute. It's now adopted by general consensus. And by correct, Delegate Rasool, long and the short, because I was made aware of a specific instance at Virginia Tech, where they were operating one of these facilities and using it as an intern type program as a part of the educational training for students there within the university setting. And then kind of ran afoul when they lost their licensure. Some problems arose, and that's why we're doing this legislation.
Yes, sir, and I think the reason why everyone's on the same page is to ensure that the welfare of the children come first. And that's why we're formalizing what's been happening under this MOU.
Delegate Hayes.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I understand what we're getting at here, but I'm a little confused as to why we would give a pass to the Commonwealth when we don't let private citizens have the same pass, and even if there's the same kind of oversight from DSS, if this is an educational setting, mightn't it help those that were working in a facility like that to understand what the licensure process was and involved? I just get a little squeamish when we start giving exceptions that wrinkle my brow. I haven't heard a real good, I don't really get an understanding of why this is going on. I'm wondering if the paper might be able to.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate, I apologize. I didn't do a great job of explaining. Currently, because of a sovereignty provision, their exception exists. We're trying to take away the exception. What happens is that because it's an agency of the Commonwealth, which is in this case Virginia Tech, DSS cannot oversee that daycare facility unless we say that we're going to provide for an exception. And so actually, what we're doing is taking away the case for them being exempted from the oversight.
Delegate Rasul, am I not correct in using Virginia Tech as an example? They had been operating this facility because of a reinterpretation of what state law allows as it relates to licensure. They no longer have their license. All this will do is allow DSS to put the Virginia Tech facility in the same posture as any other private entity and license them to the same standard. So it was kind of the reverse of what the delegate's concern was. This is making sure that they're going to hold the same bar and standard as any privately licensed facility. Would that be correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. The universities do not want these children in daycare facilities that do not have this oversight.
Any further questions from the committee?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. If y'all could use your request to speak button, that would be good. Delegate Bell.
Chair, Trustee Mercer, request to speak button.
Yes.
Permission to speak. Mr. Chair, this has, as we say in courts, a lot of new words. And I'd ask staff, I mean, is this just a restatement of what is somewhere else in the code but not right there? And I'm looking at page 6 and 7 of the sub.
There, specifically the suspension provisions. Is this just a restatement of what's out there in the private sector?
It's added.
So what those sections are doing is establishing a process for when we have a child welfare agency that is operated by an agency of the Commonwealth to appeal summary orders of suspension and the right to appeal notice of intent. It is new. It's a little different. And so what has happened is because we are now pulling agencies of the Commonwealth which are not, under current interpretation, required to be licensed and creating a new requirement for licensure for those entities, they've set out, working with DSS, worked out provisions for how they go through some of these appeals of disciplinary actions.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Bell.
I mean, how does this relate to Rob's daycare center? In other words, the idea is to try to put it on the same footing as the private provider. How is this? Why is there not another section that says, here's how we do privates, and we'll just add public to private? This looks like a whole bunch of new ideas in 60 days here. Okay.
All righty. Is this a matter the committee would rather have go by for the day or rather have go to a subcommittee?
Mr. Chair, it's a lot of new stuff. I don't usually.
What is your pleasure? By for the day or time to a subcommittee?
Yeah, that's fair.
All right.
Everybody,
Delegate Rasul,
we're now having a Tuesday meeting.
And Delegate Bell's subcommittee 2, which will be meeting this will come up either Thursday or at a later time to be determined. All right, thank you, Delegate.
Yeah.
All righty. I believe that leaves Delegate Farrell, 1551. Or not. I thought I saw him. He's a puka. Delegate Rothfeld, did you want to present your 1922 today?
Let's go by for the day.
Bye for the day. Well, folks, having no other patrons who want to have their measures heard, we're getting ready to rise here. Subcommittee 1 will be meeting very shortly. I will, just as a general announcement, understand where we are on the process. Starting Thursday, bills that start going by at full committee are going to be looking at peril of not making it by the time, FYI. So, committee members, we've got a lot of heavy lifting to do in the next week and a half. I know we can do it. We've got to buckle up and get her done. All that being said, the committee will rise.